Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to dive into part 2 of our Firestore Database with the Composable Architecture video. And before we take a look at where we left off in part 1, take a minute to kind of subscribe and like the channel so you can get some notifications when the new videos come out. I've got a bunch more in the pipeline. And yeah, so let's take a look at, in part 1, we left off with the ability to just sign up and jump into an onboarding flow. And we run through here. All we're recording is name for now. And then we'll go to a summary page where you can submit, and that stores this user in the Firestore database. And in the settings, you have the ability to sign out. So what we're going to do today, though, is we're going to add this, like a little form to our settings page with the ability to kind of edit that profile. And so we can just, add something here. We'll hit save, and it automatically updates. And we will do this using a Snapshot Listener that Firestore allows, and we will observe changes to that listener and propagate those through shared state in the Composable Architecture. So again, if you haven't been following along, you can download the source code to this in the link in the comments and pick up right here, or I encourage you to go back and watch part 1 so you can see where we're going to be going with this. All right, let's start diving in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is come into settings, and we're going to focus on the view here. So we want to be able to move over to a profile view. So let's go ahead and set up a navigation stack here, and we'll just do settings, feature, and we'll do, we're just going to add a reducer here for editing the profile. We'll create this edit profile feature in a minute, but for now, we will add that, and then we're going to need to add a path to our state. So we'll do that here. And then we'll also need to add a path to our action. So we can do that in here. And then we'll need to handle default case for that. So we'll do, and we'll just return none. Excellent. And then now down in our view, we're going to want to handle everything in a navigation stack. So we'll do this, and we'll do destination, and we'll make this destination. We'll just call this store that's passed in here destination store, and then we'll have to switch on the case of that, which will be destination store.case, and we only have one. We'll do edit profile. This is going to be, what's the edit profile store, which again, we don't have this yet. We'll create this shortly. And also with the view, we're just going to be passing that in just like that. And that should be all we need to get the navigation stack set up in our settings view. This won't compile yet because we haven't created our view. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can just create a new file in settings here. We will use one of our TCA templates. I'll leave a link to the TCA template video if you guys want to see how to create these templates. But we're going to need an alert and some binding. So we'll use the binding and alert template, and we'll call this edit profile. And this created a new TCA feature with all the boilerplate for, a binding action with an alert and all the defaults and everything, and creates the feature as well as the view for us. This is really handy. Okay. So now let's set this up. So we know we're going to need a name because that's the thing we are going to be editing. So let's just do name string. And where are we going to get that name? We're going to pass in a user object. We're not going to use the shared user here because we don't want to actually mutate this user here. We're going to make some changes and send it up to Firestore and have Firestore change it and then observe those changes. So we're not gonna have a shared user here. This is just going to be a regular user. Let's import domain. And we're going to initialize our name to the user.name so that we can actually see what it is currently set to. And then we will do, we'll hold on to the user as well, but we're going to use a let, so we can't change it. We want to hold on to this so we can actually compare any changes we make to this name to the original version to see if we've actually made a change or not. And we can disable or enable the save button accordingly. And we can go ahead and actually add some state here that looks at this. We can say, we can do like save disabled. We'll call it, we want to disable the save button if no changes have been made, or basically if the name is empty. So we could say if name equals user.name, return true, or name dot is empty, and then else return false. And this will just allow us to save and disable that button. Let's go ahead and add our save action. And we'll add a default value for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste in this view. And what we have is basically a text field that will have the name, this rounded corners. We'll import common. And this is a custom view modifier for those who haven't been following along that we created in previous videos. And it just adds a nice outline to our text field. And looks like we have an error here. We need to pass in the user. And let's go ahead and build this and see what it looks like. Great, and so we added this, the save button up in the toolbar. We added the disabled, adding this save disabled state property that we added. Can't see it because we don't have a navigation view, so we can just do, in our preview, we'll wrap it in a navigation view so we can actually see that button and the title, and it's disabled because nothing has changed. If I go ahead and make an edit to this, you can see that the save button is now enabled, and if it gets to empty again, you can see it's also disabled. Perfect. So we are ready to actually save changes. So let's jump over to our user client, and let's add a new request object to pass into our client to make those changes. And this will just be, update user info request. We'll pass in the name since it's the only thing we're going to be able to change. And then we will also add a new function called update user. And this will take in the request and it's just going to return void response because we don't want to return the updated user because we're going to listen to those changes from a snapshot listener, which we'll get to later. Let's go ahead and add the function implementation to this, and we'll return void response for now. And let's add this to our preview so we can get all this to compile. And let's go ahead and this needs to be underscore in, same thing here. Okay, let's go ahead and give this a build. Let's switch over to user client. Great, now let's take a look at implementing this function. So our implementation of this, let's grab our request. And then the first thing we'll do, we'll get an instance of now, as this is going to be, we're going to update the last modified date of this. And we're going to use an instance of encoder as well, the Firebase encoder. Firestore encoder. And then we're going to get an instance to the existing user ref. So we'll do user ref is going to equal Firestore collection from users and document. Perfect. And then to actually get the existing document itself, we're going to do the user document equals user ref dot get document. And the reason why we're breaking this up here, this needs to be marked with a try, is because we're going to update this user ref here in a second. But we want the user document so we can convert it to our DTO. So we'll do FB user equals try user document dot data as FB user. So we're basically going to initialize an instance of our DTO and mutate it here. User.name is going to equal request.name and FB user dot last modified on is going to equal, again, we're converting to timestamp here to mitigate any of the precision issues you have with date and timestamps in Firebase. And now we're going to use our encoded user is going to be this encoder. We're going to encode that FB user back into it. Then we'll do try await our user ref. We're going to set the data to that encoded user. And we're going to pass a merge strategy just so we're not overwriting the entire user document. And then we have our return void response. And let's see, let's try await. And I think that's all we need for our implementation. So to make this call from our edit profile, we can jump back over here. And we need to add a couple dependencies to our feature. And so let's add those. We have our user client and our dismiss, and we need to import user client. And we're adding this dismiss because we're going to want to, after we've made a successful save, we're going to just want to pop back to our root here or back to settings. And this will allow us to do that fairly easily. Let's give this a quick build. And then we're going to want to hold on to some state for while the save is in flight. So we can add that. And we'll add our save response action. And we'll just add a default for that. And we should be ready to implement the save button tap. So let's implement our save button tapped feature or action. First thing we'll do is we'll create a request. And ID It'll be our state.user.id, and our name will be state.name, because that's what we've been updating. And then we will set our save request in flight equal to true. And then we'll turn a run effect, and we will capture our request and send. And then we will wait send, save response, result. We will do try await self.userClient.update. Should be update user request. Pass in the request. And then we will need to do cancelable ID. Oh, we're going to need a cancel ID. Just add that real quick. We don't need this return statement anymore. And let's go ahead and add our responses. And inside of our success, first thing we'll do is we'll make sure we set our request in flight to false. And then what we're going to want to do is return an effect. We don't need send, so we'll just do underscore in, and we'll do wait self.dismiss. Now this is coming from that dependency that we passed in up here. And so when we have a successful save, we're just going to pop back to our settings tab. And now let's handle the failure case. And we're going to want the error, so we'll do. And here, let's print out the error first. And let's set our state, or save request in flight. And then we're going to set the alert state here. State.alert equals alert state. And we'll do a text state of, and actually we're going to add a default message here that we can use basically for testing purposes, but also it's nice to just have a persistent default message we can add. So we'll add an extension and add a default error message property that we can go ahead and set down here. We'll do user client dot default error message, and then we will need to return none. And I think that should be all we need in order to write some tests and see this working. Let's see. We just probably need to build. Why can't I find that one either? Let's just double check in our user client. Oh, it looks like we have we misspelled the request. So let's take this. We will go back in here. Let's update those. Get that spelling correct. We added that static let. So let's rebuild user client. Perfect. Now let's switch back over to settings and edit profile, and we'll rebuild here and see if we can get those errors to go away. So you still can't find this default error message. Did I spell it correct? Let's go over here. User client error. That's right, not user client. Perfect. And let's go ahead and add an error preview so we can see that. And let's call this one success. And let's just be update user. And let's build this. Again, all we're doing here is overriding the dependency for update user, and we're just going to throw an error. And so we should be able to see that in the preview. And then we'll write some tests for this too. All right, and if we switch over to the error, and oh, we forgot to wrap it in a navigation view, so let's do that. Now, if we make a change and we hit save, we should see our error. This is our default error message that we added. This is great. So let's add a test here. So let's go down to our settings tests. Let's add a new file. Swift testing. And we're going to call this edit profile tests. And we will import Composable Architecture. And import settings. We need domain and user client, I think. Okay. This will be edit profile tests. And our first test, let's make this main actor. First test we're going to write is just to make sure the save disabled functionality is working. So we'll call this test save disabled. And so we're going to need an instance of our store, test store of, and this is going to be our edit profile feature. Give it an initial state of edit profile feature dot state user get mock. And just do edit profile feature. And so our first thing we're going to do is expect that store.state.save disabled is going to equal true because our initial state should be nothing has changed. And then we'll do await store.send. And we're going to pass this into the binding. We'll make an actual change to our name binding. We'll just say different name, like that. And then we'll need to expect that name is going to equal different name. And then we should be able to expect that store.state.save disabled equals false. And let's go ahead and run this. Great. Next, let's test our save success function. So let's do test function, test save success. And we will need an instance of our store. But this time we're going to override the dependencies. And we don't need to pass anything in here. What we do want to do is client.update user equals to pass in sendable here. Don't need the request, so we'll just underscore, and we're going to return void response. And then again, we're going to want to pass this different name again. We need to mutate it so we can actually hit save. And then we're going to want to actually tap the save button. So we'll do wait store.send, save button tapped. And we'll make sure that the save request in flight gets set to true. Then we will wait store.receive. Save response dot success. And we'll make sure that this gets set to false. That's all we should really be testing here. Let's go ahead and run it. And it passes, great. And so finally we can test our failure state. And we will want to overwrite the dependencies, but let's get our store, and inside we will we'll send something different like user not found or whatever. We're going to throw an error there. Again, we're going to mutate the name. This doesn't really matter, but it allows us to enable save. We will go ahead and tap the save button. And then what we're going to want to do save. This is going to be a save response dot failure. And first thing we were going to check is that this gets set to false, which it should. And here's why we added that default error message, because now we can do alert equals alert state. We'll pass in the text state of our user client error, not user not found, because we aren't actually switching on that, which we could handle that, but we're just going to do this default error message for now. And we'll go ahead and run that. And that passes as well. And that should be all the tests we need for our edit profile. So if we move back to our settings view now, we can go ahead and implement our view with the form. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this in. And so basically what we're going to do is we'll need to add this edit profile button tapped action, but we'll have, we're going to mimic the navigation link and use a button in our sections as opposed to a navigation link. I think it just makes for a cleaner action being sent into the store, and we can test it better. So let's add that. And inside of our state, we will need to handle that. And what we're going to want to do is just append our edit profile to the path. And we can do that with state.path.append. And we'll do edit profile state. And we're going to pass in our state.activeUser. Return none. We moved our button as well inside of the form here, and let's take a look at what that looks like in our preview. And so if we tap this now, we should push over here. Great. We can, I think the changes are not taking effect here. Oh, we forgot to add, I think, our for each at the bottom of our reducer. Yeah, so let's put that on. That should fix that little bug. Now when we push on, we make a change. Yes, our state is changing and it pops back. Perfect. And let's go ahead and add a test to our settings test for this. We'll call this test edit profile button tapped. We will need our store. And we don't need to override any dependencies here, but what we want to do is await store.send.edit button item tapped. Edit profile button, sorry. What we want to do in here is make sure that I'll send you a path. ID 0 gets set to our edit profile feature dot state user should equal $0 dot active user. If we build and run this now, and our test succeeds. This error is just a compiler bug here. Great. So that should be all we need to do for our settings page. Now let's take a look in the simulator and see where we stand. So we have our profile view, which is great. We're logged in as test 3. If we go over here and make a change now, let's just do test 3 and hit save. We are popping back, but you'll notice the name has not changed here. But if we come over to actual Firestore, you see that the name actually has been updated in the database. And so what we need to do is observe that change, and so we can update our shared state throughout our application. So let's take a look at that. So the first thing we're going to want to do is add a function that lets us observe those changes. And so we do that in user client. And in here, we're going to add a new function and called observe user change. And let's just add that here. And this is going to be return an async throwing stream of user objects anytime this user changes. And so let's go ahead and add implementation here. And we'll add it down here as well to make our compiler happy. And inside of here, we'll just return an empty async throwing stream with a get mock. But inside of our actual implementation for this, we're going to actually need to go to the database and add an observation in the form of a snapshot listener. And so what that looks like is we can return. First, let's get an instance of our database so we can capture that inside for us. So we'll do that, and then we'll do return async throwing stream of user self. The continuation that gets passed in, we're going to want to see. Oh, we are going to want to pass in a user ID here. So we did that in our function, right? Because we need to know which user we want to observe. So it's a string. Let's do user ID in, and down here we'll need to do this. And we will capture that user ID like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do let user change listener is equal our db dot collection users document user ID. Then we're going to do add snapshot listener. And in what we pass in for the snapshot listener, it's a reference as well as an error. And inside of here now we can do a task. We'll do this because we'll handle the errors. And if we do get an error, we're just going to finish the continuation. We'll throw the error. And so if we get an error, what we're going to want to do is we're going to throw a user client error dot unknown. And we're going to pass in that error so we can actually wrap it in our own user client. And else, if we have document for a reference, we're going to get the FB user. Then we're going to create our own instance of user using that initializer we created earlier. We'll pass in the FB user to this, and we'll guard on it because it is an optional. And if that fails, we're going to throw user client error. Let's see, invalid user object. Yeah. Okay. Then else, at this point, we don't have an error, so we don't have a user, so we can throw, let's see, user client, user not found. If we do have that, we're going to continuation dot yield the actual user. Let's see what our error is here. User change listener. I'm using brackets, what I should be using. There we go. That should make that go away. Great. Now, the reason why we captured this user change listener is because we actually need to do that dance with unchecked listener. Because I mentioned this in a previous video, but Firebase does a lot of these listeners are returned as NS objects, which don't conform to sendable, and so we have to do this unchecked sendable and wrap the user change listener inside of it, and then our continuation dot on termination is going to equal, we need to pass sendable, do checked listener, value dot remove. And that should be what we do. So what is this doing? We've added this add snapshot listener to the user's collection in Firestore by passing this user ID to it. So what this is going to do is anytime that this user changes, or this basically query changes, this add snapshot listener is going to fire off a change with the reference to this document. And so that's why we can grab the DTO from the document and create our own user and yield it back. And now this is converting it to an async throwing stream, so we can observe this change anywhere we want and then update our shared state. So let's go ahead and take a look at doing that. So our shared state lives in our tabs view now. Right here, this is where our shared user will exist. And the reason here is because this gives us access to both home and settings, to pretty much anything in our signed in state of the application. Tabs is the root for that. So let's go ahead and make sure that tabs has access to user client first. Let's come up here. Let's add it. Let's go ahead and switch over to tabs. Give that a build. Perfect. Okay, so in our tabs view, we can now add a dependency to our user client, to our feature. This is going to need to be sendable. And then we're going to need to handle a response when the user changes. So we'll add an action for that. And we're also going to need an action to start observing it. And we'll do this in a on task action that we can call when tabs is loaded. And so we can do that down here at the bottom where tab view comes in. We will just call this a task. And we're going, the reason we use it on task as opposed to like on appear is we only want this to be called once, and that's the first time that tabs loaded. If we did on appear, this would be called every single time. And so now we can handle these actions up here. Let's do the on task first. So we will do case.on task. And what we're going to want to do is return a run. And we're going to want to capture a couple things here. So we're going to want a user ID, and that's going to equal our state.activeUser.id. And we want send. And so for an async throwing stream, we're going to do for try await user in await user client dot observe. See, observe, there was user change and the user ID. And then we'll do an await send user change response. And we will do dot success, give it user. And instead of doing the result here, we're going to actually catch the error on the return of the effect. So we can do catch, we can do error, send in, and we can do await, send user change response dot failure with the error. And cancelable, we actually need a cancel ID here. Let's add one real quick. Call it user observation. And cancel in flight. We'll see what doesn't like that. There we go. Observe user change, can't find it. Let's make sure we didn't name it something else. Observe user change. Might need to give this a build to make it find that. Oh, I have this in the wrong spot. It needs to be on the tab view. Gets rid of one error. Okay, and that's just a compiler issue. We can get that to go away here in a second. So that is actually making the call to observe the user change, and we will send an issue to when we get the success, we will send the user to the success case. When we get the failure, we will send the error to the failure case. So yeah, let's take a look at those now. First, let's see so we can get this error to go away. Still running our simulator. Let's clear all issues. Clean. Okay, perfect. So in our success case, what we can do is just set our active user equal to user, return none. And so now, since this is our shared active user, anyone else who's observing or wherever this active user is used will get that update and refresh their views. And now we can handle the error case as well. And inside of here, for now, we're just going to print the error. Return none. And that should be all we really need to do to see the changes. And let's go take a look in the simulator and see if that actually works now. Okay, so we have signed in as test 3. It's showing the changes we made earlier because it did a fresh pull from the database when we launched. But if we go in here and let's make another change, let's just actually erase those. And we'll just say something like this. And we go ahead and hit save. We come back, we can now see that test 3 changed is updated here as the name. And that's because we are updating this active user to user there. And we should be actually able to write a test for this as well. Let's take a look at that. So to write a test for observation like this, it gets a little tricky, and we did something very similar to this in our authentication series where we observed authentication state changes. And what we did there was we added a function or a struct to help enable that. And so we're going to do something similar here. We're going to add a new file in our user client, and we're going to call this user observer. And I'm just going to paste in the code. And what we're doing here is we are adding an actor that we can wrap the observation of our user object in, so we can add it to previews and add it to tests and things like that. And so we can override the observation of those users. And basically what we're doing is mimicking what Firestore does itself. We're implementing a mock API here that is reactive and does this observation. And so we'll have several functions. We have this add continuation, we have this remove continuation, we have an update user that will actually use to change the user, and then we have this function observe user change, which is similar to that as Snapshot Listener. This is what we will call to start making observations. And again, this is exactly what we did in the authentication series. So I go into much more in-depth detail in that series. So if you want to go check those out, I'll leave a link in the comments to that specific video. But let's take a look at how we're going to use this. Let's start back in our tabs view, and we'll switch this over to tabs. And I'm going to overwrite this preview with a preview that uses this new user observer. And before we do that, let's go ahead and build user client so we get that change in. And let's go ahead and build tabs as well so it gets those changes. Great. And so we now can replace this preview with one that uses our user observer. We need to import. We had already done that. Our user client should be able to see it now. make sure that is public. Actor user observer, which it is. Maybe that's a compiler issue. We'll build here again in a second. But what this is doing is we're going to override our observe user change function. And what we're going to do is use the user observer's observe user change instead. And then again, we're going to override this update user function from our user client, and we're going to send the update user to our user observer. And so basically this is mimicking what Firebase does in the backend, and we can actually watch it happen here. So let's build our preview. Okay, so if we hop over here to settings and we jump in here and we update this and we hit save, we can see that test user 444 is updating. And this is all happening in the preview because of this user observer. This error again is a compiler issue, just indexing and can't pick up the change into user client. But we can actually go ahead now and add a test in our tabs test to handle this as well. Let's take a look at that. So let's add a new test. We'll call it test active user updated. And we're going to need an instance of our test store. And just like in the previews, we're going to override the user client with this user observer. So we'll need to create an instance of that. And our first thing we're going to want to do is send that on task. Oh, we'll need to import our user client so we can actually see our user observer. Perfect. Okay, so what we want to do is send our on task event into our store. We're going to hold on to this observe task because we need to cancel it, because this is going to be a long running effect that won't be finished by the end of, it doesn't finish on its own. So we actually need to cancel it at the end of our test. And so we have to hold on to it. And so after we observe that or call that on task, we should receive this user changed response event. And basically it's going to set the active user to the get mock. And so we can go ahead and test this. Okay, great, that works. So we actually are getting the success call, and the active user is getting set. What we want though here now is to run through the whole flow of changing that in the user profile. So we can do that. First thing we will do is send a tab selected to the store. So switch to the settings tab. And then we will tap the edit profile button. And so what we're going to do, verify that, the path gets updated to the edit profile. And then we're going to mutate that name inside of edit profile, the binding. So this is something we already did in our, that edit profile test, but we're just kind of mimicking it here to test the whole flow. We'll set it to a different name. And then we're going to actually go ahead and hit that save button. And this will trigger a couple things. So we'll get the save request in flight. It's going to set to true, and then we're also going to receive some events. So inside of the edit profile, this we're going to receive that success, and the saved request in flight will be set. But now we're also going to be testing that active user, and this is inside this $0 is tabs at this point. So what we're checking here is that the active user is actually going to get set to this different name, and this is the test that we want. We want to verify that that shared user is going to get updated, and so we can actually then receive the success, and we should then be able to verify that we get the pop back. So we also implemented that on a successful save. We're going to pop back to profiles so we can verify that that gets set to nil. And then again, like I said, we're canceling the long running observation for the end of the test. And so we can go ahead and run this, and it's successful. So we can see that we have tested the whole flow, using this user observer to kind of mimic that functionality that Firebase gives us. So that's it. We've run through a lot. Let's take a quick refresher. So if we open up the simulator and let's go ahead and sign up with a brand new user. We'll do something like test6@test.com. And we hit sign up, come into our onboarding flow, give it a name, test6. And when we submit, we're storing it in the database. And now when we come over here, we can do something like different name. And when we hit save, pop back here, and we can see that the name has been updated because we are observing that change and broadcasting it out as shared state throughout the application. And this is really powerful. The shared state inside of from Point Free as a library is amazing, as well as the ability to kind of observe those changes from Firebase using converting it from a snapshot listener to an async throwing stream is great. So if you guys like this video, again, please subscribe and leave some comments. Tell me what I can do better, anything like that. I thrive on feedback. So I hope you like it, and stay tuned. There's more to come. Thanks, guys.